Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To make it 6 o'clock, if we could start the meeting. Just the preliminary warning, if it is a warning, is that the meeting will be actually broadcast and streamed live, and if anybody doesn't want to be within and on the pictures, if they could let the committee clerk know, and the cameras won't be focused on you at any time. Okay. If we can start the agenda with apologies for absence.
Councillors Alan Darney, Vivian and Abraham. I believe Councillor Gary is substituting for Councillor Abraham.
Thank you very much. Urgent business. I've not been notified of any urgent business. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest in any matter arising? No. Public questions. I don't think we've received any public questions. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated, I'll move them as a correct record. Is that seconded? Thank you. Are we all agreed? Agreed. If we can then go on to the planning applications. Sorry,
Chair, just a quick one. Was there a late list? We don't have any detail of a late list or any people that are speaking.
The late list has been circulated and put on the website, as well as...
We've not got a hard copy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we usually get a hard copy for here, don't we?
Yeah. Yes, there is a late list. You'll receive it now. If committee don't mind, what I propose is to change the running order. There's just one item where we do have people attending, so I'm going to suggest that we, with your permission, take the item 9 first, which is the former High Barn Resource Centre. Is a committee happy with that? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. If I can ask the officers to outline the application to committee.
Thank you, Chair. So this application, as the Chair said, is for the former High Barn Resource Centre on High Barn Street, Royton. Full planning permission for the redevelopment of the site with a 3-storey apartment block comprising 30 residential apartments with associated landscaping, access and egress, car parking, drainage and the supporting infrastructure. This slide outlines to the committee the location, and the edge red shows the overall application site. The dashed black line on the inside that red edge shows the layout of the original building, which has been removed, and you can see that to the north is High Barn Street, and to the northeast runs the Shaw Street. This aerial image is just to show the site now cleared and show obviously sort of the existing green areas that are on the site, and it quite clearly shows how close the application site is to the centre of Royton. And local facilities include obviously the High Street, a co-op, Lidl, the railway pub, the health centre to the north and the leisure centre to the north. Here's some site images also, what wide angle ones. The top one is from the corner of High Barn Street and Shaw Street. Shows the site is obviously cleared. There's an area of green space, and it shows the sort of changing levels from High Barn Street to the sort of plateau of the site. The bottom image is from Shaw Street and shows obviously one of the neighbouring properties there, which is 1 Shaw Street on the far left of the image. At the back, the other closest neighbouring properties are Arden House, and then on the far right, on the opposite side of High Barn Street, is the Spring Court. Sorry. The layout before you here is the amended layout following consultation both with neighbouring properties and the council's consultees. The access to the site for vehicles has been moved from between the development and Arden House to Shaw Street. So access is now of Shaw Street rather than High Barn Street. The parking is all to the rear of the building, to the rear of the building, and the access for pedestrians is also from the rear. Parking is provided, as I've said. A bin store is provided, and cycle storage is provided. There's a pedestrian link to High Barn Street, to obviously aiding pedestrians getting to the local centre. And there are replacement trees that are dictated by the smaller dark green marks. This is just to give an impression to the committee of the overall finish of the building. As you can see, the top image, the top line is showing on the left is showing the High Barn Street elevation. That's also been amended to include a break-up in materials and a staggering of the front elevation to provide some more interest on High Barn Street, given that being the main public vista of the building. This slide shows the sections through the site. The top one is the section with High Barn Street in the middle, and it shows the separation distances. And the bottom shows between the building's proposed gable and the front elevation, as far as I've considered it to be, of Arden House, which is obviously the existing buildings there. The application is before committee with a recommendation, an officer recommendation of approval. However, that is subject to both the conditions outlined in the agenda, conditions which have been amended, and a couple of additional conditions which are noted in the late list. The additional ones in the late list relate to the crime impact assessment comments that come from the police, which raise no objection, and drainage comments confirming just further details regarding sustainable drainage scheme is required. Please note, however, there's a drafting error on my behalf. I do apologise that on page 4 of the late list, line H isn't actually required of the condition, and if the committee was resolved to approve the application, that is suggested that it's deleted. In addition to the conditions, there is also, as part of the recommendation, a unilateral undertaking legal agreement which has been agreed in principle with the applicant for a contribution of £85,000 towards the enhancement of existing open space in the local area, and the application is for 100% affordable units, and in the late list there is the breakdown of what the mix and the tenure will be for the committee's consideration. Thank you much.
Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions of the officer initially? Yes, Councillor Damon.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously the usual thing with these developments with flats and multiple properties in a building is obviously all the room sizes are the right sizes and everything. That's the main thing, the big thing on this one.
Yeah, I can confirm that the accommodation that is being provided meets the national housing space standards, which is what we now benchmark all our residential developments against. Yeah.
Is there any further questions of the officer? No? Okay then. Moving forward, if I couldn't ask Mr. Jeff Oliver to speak now. Mr. Oliver, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Before the 3 minutes are up, you get a warning when the time is coming to an end. So if you could start in your own time, please. Please, yeah.
I'm actually representing the residents of Spindle Court, which is a development of 14 bungalows specifically designed for elderly people, many of whom who live there have disabilities. Spindle Court's directly across High Barn Street from the proposed development, which we fear will tower over the bungalows. At 13.5 metres high and situated on land already elevated above street level, it'll be the highest structure around, being some 3.5 metres higher than the properties of the nearby Royton Hall estate. Its basic appearance is also of concern. Its slab-like construction with bars across the Juliet balconies makes us wonder if this building is an annex of Strangeways. The height of the building and its proximity to Spindle Court bring into doubt the level of light that would fall on Spindle Court, especially in wintertime, when the low sun would travel behind this building, depriving the bungalows of any winter sunshine. I would therefore request a survey is carried out according to the British Research Establishment document called Site Layout Planning for Daylight and Sunlight. The development is 3 floors of 30 flats, and even if the single bed flats could house 2 people, there are only 30 parking spaces allocated on the site and 1 visitors parking space. We're concerned that lots of households these days actually have 2 cars, and that parked cars could spill out onto surrounding streets. Also, the additional traffic flow in and out of the site would impact on the already very busy High Barn Street. On a broader aspect, this development comes on the back of considerable number of developments in this small area of Royton. Houses on the former Byron Street school site, houses on the former police station site, more houses on John Hogan Close, houses and flats on both sides of Edge Lane Street, which is almost adjacent to this development. And also we've got the 99 houses being constructed at the moment on the former Fir Mill site, now known as Vernon Gardens. All these will increase traffic pressure on High Barn Street with a subsequent decrease in air quality. And just about a mile away are the 400 houses being built at Cowlishaw, which will also increase traffic in Royton. And we believe that Royton is actually becoming overdeveloped. Overall, we're not actually against future development of this site, but this building is unsightly, too big, incorrectly positioned and inappropriate for the area. We would request that planning permission be denied and that something more appropriate and sensitive to the surroundings, and also have consideration and respect for Royton and its people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Has any members got any questions for Mr. Oliver at all? Councillor David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Hiya, thanks for that. I'm just wondering, you mentioned about the vehicles that, you know, potential traffic that could be parked in the area, residents. Now, what used to be there before, because you're a local resident, aren't you, obviously, and what used to be there before and how many vehicles would have been parked in those around about that time? You know, would it be a big difference?
What was there before was it was, what was it called? High Barn House, sorry.
Nursing home.
Yeah, a nursing home. So there was traffic going in and out of there, but it didn't have an impact. The cars appeared at the front of the building. We didn't notice any problems there, really, with traffic for that, which I think was probably minimal. But this development, you'll have people going in and out all day, several journeys. If each flat has 2 cars, you know, you're looking at 60, 120 car movements a day of people going in and out, and all coming onto High Barn Street, which they will, and causing chaos, I suppose, at the traffic lights. Also at school times, when the Royton Hall School further up High Barn Street is delivering and children leaving, it's chaos on High Barn Street during that period. And coming here tonight, I had to queue for a long way down High Barn Street before I could get through the traffic lights at the junction of Rochdale Road. So, adding to that, we've also got the 99 houses which are being built on Vernon Gardens. I know their entry and exit will be on Radcliffe Street, but a lot of that will filter onto High Barn Street. And again, the 400 houses at Cowlishaw, a lot of that will filter down into High Barn Street and down Shaw Road towards Broadway and onto Manchester. So yeah, we do anticipate extra traffic, and of course exhaust fumes and things like that, which you know, they're frowned upon these days, aren't they? We're looking towards changing cars to electric vehicles and try and clean the air up. You know the issues we're having at the moment with the clean air zone and everything. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Councillor Sergian.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question, really. You mentioned, obviously, you compared it to Strangeways earlier. Can you just expand on exactly what it is that you're particularly against in terms of the design or potentially the location of the building you mentioned earlier? If you could just expand on that, please.
It's the general appearance of the block, if you like. It does look like it's one solid block, and the bars on the Juliet balconies give a kind of cell-like appearance across each balcony. There are several of them. I can't see exactly where they are from this distance, but there are several of these bars across the windows, well, just look at it. You know, it's that's all you've got to do.
And the height.
And the height of it, the height of it, and it's, you know, it's the height that tends to bother us really, and obviously the size of it, and its close proximity to the edge of the road. It's although it's sitting on, it's quite close to the pavement, even though there's banking leading up from the pavement, and the banking can be at the Shaw Street corner, almost 2 metres high. So that shoves the height of that building up even further at that point, up to 50 feet, which is, it's a big building. Yeah. And you can see from that image there, I mean, we were sitting in Mr. Howe's bungalow, which is more or less on the left of that image at the top, the other day when it was a nice sunny day, and the sun was tracking round his lounge window, and I just happened to say to him, well, if that building goes up there, we won't see that sun in the winter time. It's you know, it would be so high that there would be no sunlight whatsoever on that side of the Spindle Court complex.
Is there any further questions? No? Sorry? I guess certainly it's related to what we're...
Sorry. Yeah, has the measurements been done with regarding the sunlight being taken off the bungalows? And another question is, I'm surprised that there's only one parking space allocated for visitors. Is there any way that anything could be altered to expand on that?
So in regards to the assessment of the impact on the neighbouring properties, as you can see from the section there that's provided, that there is ample separation distance in regards to the requirements of the design in between the properties to allow for it. I appreciate that the building is taller than the buildings which it neighbours. However, the building that previously occupied the site was incomparable to Arden House, which you can see on the bottom image there, and the difference in the height between the new building and the ones that are joined at Arden House. It is a number of metres, however it's not excessive to be the point where it's considered that it impacts the amenity of the occupiers of Spindle House or Arden House insufficiently to warrant a recommendation of refusal on the basis of the guidance which we consider it against. And in regards to the parking, the 30 spaces which are proposed and one visitor space, that's what's before you today. For that to be changed, the application would have to get deferred, and we'd have to go away and speak to the applicant to have it, to see if they would be willing to change it. But that would require a valid planning reason for them to want to change it. And as you can see from the report, it's been considered by the council's highway engineer that the arrangements are acceptable.
But is this space there for another? Is this space there for another parking space?
I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Could I bring the highway officer in, just talk through that Wendy?
So as I say at every meeting, there aren't any national or local parking standards, so I make an assessment of what we think is acceptable really. So we're in a very sustainable location, so everyone living in the flats could walk to the shops, bars, public transport, schools, so the provision of 30 spaces for 30 apartments is perfectly fine, it's fine. In reality what will happen is if you visit somebody living in the flats, if there's a parking space you'll probably just park in it. There are opportunities for parking in Royton Town Centre. There's a car park across the road, so again that didn't particularly worry me. I'm not concerned that because of this development there'll be a lot of additional on-street parking that will cause congestion. Right.
Councillor Torr.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the officer. Compared to the size of the building, do we have enough disabled parking, and is the building got disabled access? Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm that there is disabled parking and there is disabled access. A number of the ground floor accommodation is for disabled occupants. Obviously, the whole thing is 100% affordable accommodation. Obviously, there's a breakdown of that into to rented and to buy. But a number of them are for designed for disabled occupiers.
Councillor Surgeon, do you want?
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to what the resident mentioned to the planning officer, can you confirm the materials, the colour, the design, etc. of the proposed building meets the minimum standards that's required? Thank you.
Just bring up the images. In relation to the design of the building, it's of a modern apartment design. I appreciate that, and obviously Juliet balconies are part of the modern built form. We see them in developments in and around the town, and we've seen them recently used in other developments that have been approved in Royton. The applicant has gone away following comments regarding the fenestration of it and looked to break up the frontage in relation to staggering it. The areas that you see where it picks the eaves line, the building picks up, that is actually a staggering of the front elevation. It comes forward and back, and then obviously it's a bit hard to pick up on there, but there is different materials to try and break up the frontage. So it's considered that the design is acceptable in its position and its height. Being a corner property, obviously it draws to that corner and it provides that interest.
Thank you. I don't think we've got any further questions in this part. Could I, at this stage, ask Mr. Tom Whitehead to speak on behalf of the applicant? Mr. Whitehead, the same 3 minutes is afforded to yourself as the previous speaker.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, and good evening. I'm Tom Whitehead. I'm the Group Town Planner for the applicant. Here with me this evening is also Philip Jones of First Choice Homes Oldham and Liz Slater of Barton Wilmore, our planning advisor. From the outset, we have worked with officers to design a quality scheme that will provide 30 new homes in Royton. All of them will be affordable and they'll be delivered by First Choice Homes Oldham. As the officer's report confirms, the site is a previously developed site located on the edge of the town centre. The site is also identified as suitable for housing in the Council's own housing land availability assessment. As well as providing 100% affordable housing, all homes on the ground floor will be wheelchair accessible. The Council's policy requirements are therefore exceeded. In terms of design, the development presented to you today has embraced the comments and feedback provided by officers and consultees. We hear Mr. Oliver's comments and we understand the concerns, but they have been considered. The proposed building will be located 19.2 metres, that's nearly 63 feet from Arden House, and 24 metres, nearly 80 feet from Spindle Court. These separation distances exceed the standards that have been approved by the Council on nearby sites recently and ensure the development will not impact on the amenity currently enjoyed by the neighbouring residents. The officer's report already deals with the issue of loss of light and the highways issues. From an environmental perspective, the scheme will increase tree provision on the site and enhance the setting of the local area with a pocket park. A Section 106 financial contribution of £85,000 has also been agreed to enhance existing open space in the locale. Taking all these considerations into account, we consider there are 5 clear reasons to support the application. Firstly, it is located on previously developed land in a sustainable location. Secondly, the application exceeds the policy requirements for affordable and wheelchair accessible homes. Thirdly, the scheme meets the relevant policy tests in the local plan and the requirements of consultees. Fourthly, the development will provide a high quality residential development. And finally, there will be amenity benefits in terms of the landscaping. A lot of hard work has gone into getting this application to committee today. In order to secure the necessary external funding deadline, we really do need the committee to agree with the officer's recommendation this evening. As such, we respectfully request that you vote to approve the application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Whitehead? Councillor David.
A couple of questions. You say affordable housing. Is that? I'm not quite sure. I could work that out. Is it for rent or for sale? That's the first question. And first choice homes are connected, so possibly rent. I don't know. And the other question I'll ask as well is, it was mentioned about enough parking spaces. Do you consider there's enough parking spaces in that? And is there any way we could get any more? Possibly. You probably wouldn't have the answer. You probably wouldn't be able to answer that, would you? But well, whether you probably wouldn't have the authority to approve more. But those are the questions anyway.
Do you want me to answer now? In terms of the mix of affordable housing, First Choice Homes are here this evening. The officer's late list report advises that the provision of 100% affordable housing will be broken down to 33% affordable rent and 67% buy-to-rent, and those will be committed as part of the legal agreement to support the application. In terms of the parking space, we work very closely with our high-rise engineers and your consultee on the highways to look at what is necessary for development. None of us want to cause a problem in terms of the local highway and parking. We concur with your officer's recommendation, and we feel that the provision is adequate for the site.
Thank you. Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. You mentioned wheelchair accessible for some of these flats. Are they also adapted for disabled people? Have they got wet rooms or are they bathrooms, or is that something that you're looking at?
I've just liaised with First Choice Homes who are going to be delivering these, and yes, they will be adaptable homes.
Is there no further questions? No? Okay, can I ask Councillor Bashforth to say a few words on behalf of his constituents?
Thank you, Chair. Just to start off, I need to make it absolutely clear that I'm not against the principle of housing on this site. This is a previous developed site. It's perfect for housing, and I don't have any issues with that. But I think I need to just, again, I think Mr. Oliver's touched on it, but within the 280, 300 metre radius of this particular site, we've already seen several hundred new homes either recently finished or being started and finishing. So it's not as if we're against housing in this area at all. And it actually in many ways pains me to be speaking the way I'm going to tonight, because this looks like a great scheme. However, fundamentally disagree with the quality of the design. I think it's an appalling design. I grew up in this area in the 1960s, and this site was an old railway sidings and warehouse. There are lots of warehouses on here, and that building actually reminds me of one of the warehouse buildings, and which was appropriate in its time, but not now in a modern housing context. I think the design is absolutely overwhelming on that site. So my concerns are focused on the design, the scale, location and proportion of the site, and obviously on the effect it would have on the amenities of the residents of Spindle Court primarily, but also on the actual area itself. we know that quality design is important, and it's emphasised in the national planning frameworks, isn't it? And it makes us clear that high quality design is fundamental. And I think, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's it can be a very subjective thing, but that is a huge building, make no mistake about it. It's 13 metres high. It's also roughly 2 metres elevated from the edge of the road. It comes almost right up to the footpath. So you're looking at a building that's, as Mr. Oliver said, roughly 50 feet high. So, and it's the height, I think it may well be almost as tall as the town hall. It's a very big building, it's the highest one. And it'll be the first thing you see as you walk round there. I don't believe that it's sympathetic with the area. I believe that, I mean, it's also, there's also some two-bedroomed, two-storey flats on that site. Arden House has been mentioned. But Arden House is actually over 3.5 metres shorter than this. So it will come roughly up to where the eaves of the roof start. And it's set at a different angle. It isn't facing any other properties. And I have to say that Marisi, Councillor Bashford, my other ward colleague, we haven't, I don't know who else has complained about this, because we've had no complaints from the Royton Hall estate about this development. We've only had issues brought to light from the residents of Spindle Court. And at first we thought, well, I wonder what the issue is. But when you get to site, when you stand there, when you look at these drawings and when you imagine the scale of this thing, you can understand how this will have a real detrimental impact on single-storey bungalows that, albeit are some 24 metres away from this, will still be overwhelmed and by the sheer scale of this. It will also have an overwhelming dominated appearance in High Barn Street. You'll see it, it'll be the first thing you see, and that might not be a problem if the design was probably more sympathetic with the area. But those images that we see, as I've said, do remind me of the old warehouse buildings that used to be on that site. And I have to agree with Mr. Oliver about the Juliet windows, that they don't enhance it at all. They do give a more foreboding image of that building. And so another thing that, another factor that we need to consider is right behind Spindle Court is the Royton Health Centre, which itself runs the full length of Spindle Court at the back and is roughly 10 metres high. So what you've got, you would have this block of flats facing Spindle Court, a single-storey bungalows in the middle, and then a two-storey, 10-metre high sheer wall along the back. So we're sandwiching these bungalows in between these two huge buildings, and I don't see how that can be advantageous or a positive thing in anybody's books. And of course this sort of thing is contrary to policies 9 and 20 of our local plan, which is asking for good design, and it's also asking that a building fits the context of the area, and this clearly doesn't. Now, I wasn't overly bothered about the idea that there might be a lot of light. But what I did do, I had a look at the site and I did some measure, nothing scientific. Well, if you look at Google Maps on this site and you look at the direction the shadows are all falling, now this isn't scientific, but it's if you look at the direction the shadows from this site are falling, they're all falling towards Spindle Court. And there's actually an image of Google Maps that shows a bus stop, which is just on the edge of the site. And that shadow is pointing directly at Spindle Court. This is only a lamppost, but that shadow's coming halfway across the road. So imagine a building that's nearly 50 foot high and the shadow that would cast. So I'm not convinced that a thorough study has been done. And obviously we're not going to see no light in Spindle Court, but I think the difference will be considerable. The previous building that was there was 2 stories, but it was set back further than this building, quite a bit further, and it was at a slight angle. So it's not comparable with this at all in any shape or form. So I've said at the beginning, not opposing the principal housing on this site, but I'm seriously concerned that this is wholly out of context with the local environment in terms of form, scale, appearance. and the effect it will have on the people who live there and the people who pass through Royton and see this. I've said that Spindle Court could end up sandwiched between these these two buildings, and so I feel that the scale and proportion, it's just completely out of context. I don't know how to put that any further, which is contrary to policies 1, 9 and 20 of the local plan. So I'm going to ask the committee to either refuse this on those grounds, that it's contrary to the local plan for its size, scale, massing and appearance and design. Alternatively, could the developer go away and look to move this building further back to mitigate the effects that it will have on Spindle Court, and it will have on the rest of the town, because it's just too big for this area. We do need new housing, and we especially need affordable housing, but not at any cost, and not by putting the developers poor or inadequate design or financial deadlines before the amenities of an area and the residents who have to live in it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, just before I finish, I do apologise. I'm actually not... I also took a photo with a drone that's hovering 10 metres above the site, and that's what you would see. So you can get some idea of how tall this... So that's not the roof height, that would be roughly where the top windows are. So you can see it looks right across Spindle Court, and there's the health centre right behind it. And then that's looking down the side of the health centre behind Spindle Court. So I think those are just there to try and emphasise what I'm trying to say about how the scheme, how Spindle Court will be hemmed in by these two developments. Thank you for indulging me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bashworth. Has anybody got any questions for Councillor Bashworth? Councillor Gloucester?
So what would your ideal be, Steve, on this side? You know, I mean, obviously, the resident has raised height, you've raised a couple of issues. If anything can be done, what is it that you think should happen on this site?
Well, of course, ideally, we'd like to perhaps see a two-storey building there, or houses. Or this building to be moved further back and the car park be at the front. As I've said, we've had no complaints, and our colleague Amanda Chatterton, we've had no complaints from any residents about this, other than from the residents of Spindle Court. And it's not just an issue, as I said, about the residents complaining about it. I feel very strongly this is completely out of context with Royton. We've taken a lot of development there because we need to, but we shouldn't have to take something that isn't suitable just because we think we should. We need to have something there that fits, that will give good, decent housing, but will also fit in with the area. And I just believe this won't. So those are the two things, Hazel.
Elaine, Gary.
Can I just ask how many residents live on Spindle's Court? How many bungalows?
I think 13. 14 bungalows, yeah. Is there any other questions at all? No? Right, there's no further questions, so the application's open for debate and resolution. Has anybody got any comments they'd like to make? Right, Councillor Gary.
Councillor Bashford made some claims that certain planning conditions weren't being met. Can you confirm if it's correct or not?
So the policies which Councillor Bashford relate to, policy 9 mainly relates to the amenity standards which we hold applications to, and policy 20 is in relation to design. As you can see from the report before you in the agenda, I'm in a contravening view as an officer assessing the application that I feel the applicant has sufficiently designed the application to meet both those policies. And taking his points regarding an ideal and taking his points regarding the context of the area, I'll take both those points in turn. So in terms of his ideal, Councillor Bashford hasn't actually spoken about the properties to the rear, which if I bring the opposite way. So if you look at the layout of the site here, the layout and the design of it's taken into consideration that there are properties to the rear which are much further, which are part of Arden House, I believe, which are 1 to 3, 26 to 28 at the bottom of the image. But on the far right, number 1 to 3, that's another set of properties that need to be taken into consideration in terms of separation distance and in terms of amenity. So as you can see, the building's been positioned, as far as I'm concerned, as an officer assessing the amenity so that it has as minimal impact on the surrounding properties. Not just one set of properties we're talking about all the neighbours. And that's how the building, I would say, has been positioned where it is now. In relation to the parking, we take the cars from the frontage, which is High Barn Road, which is the main public vista, and we put them to the rear of the building as far as I see it. And that way we get a much greener vista for the residents of Royton, who Councillor Bashforth represents. And that obviously gives a better street frontage, because we're getting our trees there, and we're getting that tree line streets, which we've done in other parts of the borough. Taking into account the context of the site, if you look at the context of the site, you've got in the main the backdrop of the site and the backdrop of Royton. I would say myself, visiting the site and being a resident of Oldham, that Royton in the main is a 2/3 or greater story arrangement of urban environment. And actually the thing that the development that is probably you would consider, if it was a new development now, out of context with the area, is actually Spindle Court. Spindle Court, being single story in design, is actually at odds to the town hall, the high street, which is in relation to the leisure centre, the health centre, and also Arden House and the original building that occupied this site. So whilst I appreciate that the proposed development is slightly taller and slightly greater in size, I appreciate that balancing the arrangements in terms of what the applicant has done to address amenity in terms of its position and parking and the landscaping, I also balance that against the public benefits of us bringing forward affordable homes, more trees, and we also bring forward some disabled provision for future occupiers. So as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, and it's obviously what's in the report put forward to yourselves, obviously you're the final decision makers, that the design meets policy 20, it exceeds it, as the speaker on behalf of the applicant has said, and in terms of policy 9, it meets the requirements to be acceptable, which is amenity.
Councillor Oben.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at Councillor Bashforth's photographs, and there's a couple of things. They refer to the design, and when I'm looking at these, the property that we're looking at, the build that we're looking at, is that brick, red brick? It's not, because all the other properties around it seem to be red brick.
So there's a mix of two materials which are to be brick to break up the frontage. It's slightly difficult to see there. Probably better on the gable elevations. You can see there's a two different colours. But yeah, it's
because there's a tendency to have rendered or wood at the moment, isn't there, that seems to look worse than that, I think. Well, the other thing that I've noticed on one of these pictures is there's a 3-storey building at the back, is there?
So it's not
Is that not residential?
It's not sort of traditionally 3-storey. At Arden House, it's actually flats. I would say it equates to probably a story and a half, because the roof's quite squat.
There's a property there.
Two-storey and a half. It's quite. If you see at the back of the image there.
Yeah, but on Councillor Bashforth's pictures here, there's a 3-storey property that I'm looking at, and I just, towards the back of that picture.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So there is 3-storey property already there.
Tucked to the left, yeah. So the top image, it's sort of the centre where the trees are for everyone else. You can see it, so they can see. The centre of the image, there's the existing trees. The top image. If you go marginally to the left of that, you can see the 3 stories. The difference is that they've got. The difference in height, that's what I'm trying to explain. The difference in height comes that the existing buildings have got quite squat roofs. This is trying as a slightly different, more modern design where the roof's picked up a bit higher, you can see there, and that's where a lot of the difference comes with those buildings. But like I say, as far as I'm concerned, considering this against other applications in the area, I feel that it is an appropriate modern design that is very similar to other things that's been accepted recently.
Has anybody got any comments? Councillor Baronish.
Well, I think this is an issue, isn't it? Design, as Councillor Bashir's fairly said, is a very subjective issue. And I think the problem we have is if we wanted to refuse this purely on design grounds, I think we'd be really struggling to justify that when you set against the fact it's an extremely sustainable location, it's 100% affordable housing, including some disabled accessible properties. The benefits are stark. It exceeds the separation distances that we'd normally ask for between buildings, which will take account of the additional height as well, because that's part of how you assess the separation distance. So I genuinely think we would actually struggle to refuse this purely on policy grounds, which don't really do what Councillor Bashworth would like them to do by the sound of it. What they're measuring is not quite a subjective assessment of design. And I think in fairness, this is a town centre site. You will have a mix of heights of buildings. You will tend to have more monumental buildings in the town centre. And I don't think building in accordance with existing character automatically means you have to build exactly the same as already there. That isn't really what that means. And to be dynamic, you will get differences in design and height and massing and so forth. So I think if we accept that the separation distances are exceeded by some degree, and that will protect amenity as far as we possibly can, and I don't see how we could justify refusing it. So on that basis, I'd have to remove the recommendation. To approve with the amendments in the late list, yes.
Has anybody got any further comments before we go to the vote? Okay, so it's been moved that we approve the development, and it's been seconded with the conditions attached and also those on the late list. Those in favour of approval, please show. So that's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 1 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. If we then move to the first application on our list, which is Landoffale Lane, Hughes Court, Failsworth. This is an application for a development, an identical development that was approved and its time expired in 2015, and I think the only major change is in the 106 allocation, and I'll ask the officers to outline the application.
Thank you, Chair. So just building on what you'd said there, so the application does relate to one that the committee have seen before, albeit back in 2016, and it's a scheme for the erection of 18 dwellings and the associated works. So the outcome of that application is that it was approved subject to the conditions in the report at the time, and also with a Section 106 agreement linked to that, which required financial contributions towards public open space and for affordable housing. So the public open space contribution set out in the report was set at £40,000 and the affordable housing £95,000, so a total of £135,000. So more recently, the applicant has been engaging with First Choice Homes Oldham and is working in partnership to develop the site as 100% affordable housing. And it's on that basis that we're referring the application back to the committee on the basis that the affordable housing elements of the planned contribution is no longer applicable. And the intention is to utilise the full amount of funding that's available through the scheme to direct it to public open space exclusively. So that's the key reason it's been brought back to committee. Was set out in the report, the scheme is otherwise completely unaltered, The only change has been to some of the conditions just to update them, given the amount of time that's lapsed between when committee first seen it and today's date. So in short, that is the proposal, and it's recommended for approval. It's basically a minor amendment.
Has anybody got any comments at all? Councillor Orbin?
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the representations and it said none received either way. Was there any received when it first came in front of the committee?
So the report includes, apart from the conditions, an unaltered report that was published in 2016, just for background information. It does have a section on representations. It was advertised as a major application, which is a statutory requirement. And yeah, as a result of the publicity, no representations have been received. So this isn't a new application, just to emphasise that. It's a continuation of one that the committee have seen before.
So would residents now do they deserve to be consulted before it goes ahead now, or do we just go back to does it need again to be asked if anybody's got any objections? So
the scheme hasn't materially changed in any way, shape or form. The plans are the same plans.
So a long time ago, is it 6 years ago?
Yeah.
So the resident, there might be a brand new load of residents that have moved in that are opposed to it, so do they not deserve to be asked the question?
I suppose the fallback position would be through a resolution of the committee previously, the application could be approved as it was agreed at the time, which would just have a section 106 element to it, which has been superseded by the input of First Choice Homes into delivering 100% affordable housing on the site.
But if I was speaking as a resident who'd moved in there within the last 6 years, and this is coming up and I didn't know about it and it was suddenly happening, well, we're not going to get something back from these residents saying, we didn't know about it.
I think the point we're trying to make, Councillor, is that it's already been through the process. It may have been a few years ago, but it's been through those processes. This committee recommended it for approval, and we're only bringing it back now because of a minor change to the Section 106 agreement. So the fact that it's been through this committee, as it is, the planning merits of the scheme have already been considered and approved, and that has not changed. And so we're only bringing it back because of that small change to the 106. I understand what you're saying about what residents might feel about it, whether they might object or not, but the planning merits of the scheme have already been considered and weighed into the balance.
But it was considered 6 years ago before many new residents might have moved in. And that's all I'm asking, is it?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. All I'm saying is the planning merits haven't changed. So that's why, from that point of view, that you would not reconsult on it in that regard. It's a continuation of the process.
Councillor Gloucester.
What is the length of time now? I thought, is it not 5 years where they have to have started the development?
So the committee recommended for approval, but the permission was never actually granted and decided because the Section 106 wasn't signed. So that's what we're saying. It's never actually been decided, this application, in terms of the decision notice being issued. And what we're doing now is bringing it back because the Section 106 agreement is changing.
So actually, planning permission was not granted, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we said all along, yes. We said the committee resolved to approve
to grant it 6 years ago, and we're now being asked to grant it again in the same as it was 6 years ago.
Yes. Because nothing has changed.
Councillor Davis. Gary first.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. With regards to the 106, oddly enough, I was around this area with Councillor Davis yesterday, and we both commented what a nice little area it is. And so, with regards to the 106, will the local councillors have any say in how that's spent? And the other thing is, I was a bit concerned. He said in the report, it says in regards to neighbour amenities, whilst it's acknowledged that the proposal will have a tight relationship with Hughes Close and within the site on balance. And if you saw how nice it is round there, you don't want a new estate going in where they like sardines. So that just causes me a bit of concern.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the issues you'd referred to there about the sort of appropriateness of the developments and so on, that has already been considered by the committee previously. So essentially this is an update report at the front of the agenda item with the previous report just on there for background information. So the scheme that you're looking at now is absolutely identical to what was previously considered acceptable by the committee. And in terms of the public open space, the intention is for that to be directed to Moston Brook for improvements to that existing public open space.
Councillor David. So, Councillor Oldham.
Yeah, I still have this concern, and I'm going to go back to it because the planning officer said it came before the committee 6 years ago, but it wasn't granted. Is that right? It wasn't passed. So it still hasn't been granted. Is that right?
The committee resolved to approve it, but because the Section 106 agreement was never signed, we could not grant the permission as a council.
So it's not been granted permission.
It's not been granted. That's why it's the same application before you.
And it was 6 years ago with the possibility of residence. I can back this officer's recommendation, and I'm going to push for deferral so that residents can be consulted again.
Councillor Woodbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify the procedural rules on the applications, because 6 years ago this planning committee was a completely different composition of councillors. So we expected to just follow the councillors of the time's resolution, because I was under the impression that unless a decision's made, then it's not actually, it's just a nothingness. It's just deferred for 6 years, and this is now coming to us again 6 years later as another application. So even though it's not changed any, is this not a new application?
There's a distinction to be made between the decision that you make tonight is on applications like the last one. You've agreed to grant planning permission, so you've made the decision. The previous application you agreed to grant planning permission. So the committee has decided, but the actual issuing of the planning permission, the legal planning permission, that happens afterwards with the issuing of the planning decision notice. And in relation to this application, planning decision notice hasn't been issued from that decision in 2016 because the Section 106 had to be completed before the decision notice could be issued. So the decision's been taken, but the decision notice hadn't been issued because in this particular case, the landowner is a company in Kuwait, and we were having trouble engaging with them. So for whatever reason, the Section 106 hasn't been completed, but the decision's been taken. What the officers are telling you now is, from their perspective, the planning position is exactly the same. The only difference is the terms of the 106 agreement that have changed, which is why it's been brought back to yourselves to agree the variation in the terms of the 106 agreement. But the actual planning issues, as the officers have said, are exactly the same as they were in 2016. It's just that the decision notice hasn't been issued because the Section 106 agreement hadn't been signed.
Just for clarity, is if the applicant signed the original 106 agreement, it could have gone ahead and developed?
Yes, we didn't. It just, they've had it for, I mean, I've dealt with I have been dealing with the 106 agreement, and the landowner just, for whatever reason, hasn't engaged with the council for the last 4 or 5 years, for whatever reason.
Councillor Gloucester.
I'm really sorry, but I second the deferral because 6 years ago is a long time ago. We're in a very different place than we were 6 years ago. And if he can't engage and sort out a 106 agreement, there's something seriously wrong. And I'm not willing to put my name to a decision that was made by a completely different committee, because I don't actually think anybody was on this committee 6 years ago that made that decision. And for me, the permission was never granted. It's 6 years ago. It needs to be a new application for me. I'm sorry.
Councillor Brownridge.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Hoban is still maintaining that planning is a democratic process, and it really isn't. It's a quasi-judicial process dependent on planning law, and that's the way we have to make decisions. We're being told categorically the planning background to this has not changed. We have no grounds for refusing this application at all. We do not have any grounds for refusing this application. And the point that the Chair made quite clearly is if the owner signed that 106 agreement now, that planning permission would be granted because the committee, the planning authority, has resolved to grant planning permission. So I would move that we approve it in accordance with the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Councillor Oban.
Chair, I'm not after refusal, I'm after deferral, because I'm looking at our residents, and there were residents there that don't know anything about it and have not had the chance to voice their opinion. So I'm not riding roughshod over residents who deserve to be told about it. If it was 6 years ago, there may have been no residents there that was there 6 years ago.
Councillor Surgeon.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question to the officers. Can we put it as a condition that if we do approve and give permission for this site to be built on, that he has to sign it within time frame and it can't be delayed further another 6 years?
Could I ask the legal officer to do that?
Unfortunately, any conditions that you impose will be in the planning decision notice, and that won't be issued until after the 106 agreement is completed. So, unfortunately, I know what you're saying, but it comes the other way around.
I just find it peculiar that we're in a position that we've got a derelict piece of land, which is an eyesore, where we're going to have 15 public sector houses built that are desperately needed in a sustainable area, and we're trying to put every obstacle in the way. It just amazes me.
Chair,
Councillor Oban, have you got any? Are you going? What are the grounds that you want it deferred on?
I just want a deferral so that the residents around there can have the opportunity to put their voice to the proposal.
But you've been told quite clearly that, you know, that
I'm not after a refusal. I'm after deferral.
Well, you've been told quite clearly that this application has been approved subject to the signing of the 106 agreement, and the only difference that's presented to you tonight is the actual changing of the 106 agreement. So there's a instead of a contribution for affordable housing, that all the money, the 135,000, is actually going and being invested in public owned space in the area.
I've proposed a deferral and it's been seconded, I believe, Chair.
Well, actually, Councillor Brownridge proposed approval, and Councillor who said, all right. If you, I didn't hear that. I must admit, I didn't hear that. But if you want, if you are convinced that, we'll go and we'll have a vote on deferral. And Councillor Gary, you wanted to comment.
If I could just ask a question to Alan. If some people have just moved into the area within the last 6 years, would that land and the proposed development on it, would that appear on a legal search?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that in terms of when planning permissions are issued, they would be aware of it because they could do a search. But I'm not sure, the planning officer might be able to answer, in terms of before the planning permission's actually granted, whether it would appear on a local search. I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately, Chair.
If I at this stage now, before we go to the vote on deferral, ask Mr. Richards to comment.
So first of all, on that last point, I don't know for sure either. I don't think so, but I'd have to double check to make sure. I think it's only planning permissions that actually appear on the search, as well as local plan allocations and what have you. But just to make it, I just wanted to make it clear before you vote on this deferral, is that while I understand Councillor Hoban, Councillor Gloucester, I understand where you're coming from on this, the fact of the matter is this application has already been through this council's planning committee, and let me finish. A resolution to decide in favour of it has already been made, and if a 106, the original section 106 was signed tomorrow, it would have to be granted. And in that context, it is not possible for us to go back and reconsult. It's already been through committee in that sense. So I think that's what, just to, because I understand that, I totally understand why you're asking for that, but I suppose what I'm saying is if you deferred it, I'm not sure we could do what you wanted to do anyway. So just to be clear on that.
Right, we'll go to the vote anyway. It's been moved and seconded.
Sorry, Chair, I've got a question.
Sorry?
I've had my hand up. I've got a question.
Okay, what's the question?
So, in terms of why is it back here then? Just explain that bit to me, because it was agreed 6 years ago. I know it was the 106.
Yeah, that's it.
But was the 106 just, what is the difference in the 106 then to what it is now? That's what I want to know.
So section 106 originally was for a sum of £135,000 that would go to £40,000 of which would go to off-site public open space, and £95,000 would go towards off-site affordable housing. Because First Choice Homes are involved now, and they will provide the housing as affordable housing anyway, it's not appropriate to ask for that £95,000 to be for affordable housing. So instead, the whole £135,000 would go towards public open space. And that's what we need your approval for, because your decision, or the committee's decision previously, was in light of that 106 as it was, and it's now changed.
Right, Councillor Oban, and then we'll go to the vote.
I'd just like to clarify that I'm not against the proposal. What I want is a deferral to speak to the residents that live near the proximity of this now and ask if they've got any issues with it. And if it doesn't have to be a long deferral, because if I have to, I'll go and knock on the doors this week and ask them all. So I'm not asking for a lot, just a deferral. And then if it comes back and no residents have complained against it, I'm happy with it. I just think residents should be consulted.
Councillor Surgeon.
Can I just ask, we move to the vote?
Yes, we are going to do. Right. Those in favour of deferral, please show. That's 4. Those against deferral, please show. Right. Well, just because you want to do something illegal, I don't think it's shocking, Councillor Oban. Could we go with the next resolution, which is for approval, moved by Councillor Brownridge and seconded by Councillor Hussain?
Can I say something?
And we want Councillor Davis wants to speak on that.
Thanks, Chair. I've been a ward councillor in this. This is my ward. I'm a ward, and Councillor Garrett's ward as well. I've been a ward councillor here now for 4 years, approaching 4 years. I've never had anybody complain to me saying that they don't want this development to go ahead. In fact, I'm glad it didn't happen 6 years ago, because now First Choice Homes have got involved with it, and it's going to be social housing, which we're desperate for. And I'll tell you what, I do get a lot of messages saying we want social housing. So thank God for that. The only complaints that I have had about this site is somebody contacted me once about drugs paraphernalia that had been in one of, you know, when they do it in these lofts and dump all the rubbish on the site, and I got it cleared away. That's the only time I've had any correspondence about this land. So come on, let's get this social housing done. I'm all for it. And let's get on with it.
I totally agree, but let's ask the residents first.
Okay, so
you need to learn what you're doing.
All those in favour of approval, please show. So that's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against approval? 2. Okay, so it's approved. And the next application.
Sorry, Chair, can I request a 2-minute comfort break if that's okay?
Yes, 2. Yes, yeah. I'm happy for have a couple of minutes to comfort break. Yeah.
Once again, this committee is all looked at.
I think members might be. I think it'd be useful to inform members that this is being broadcast at the same time. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're still one member down, but I think that we better make a start. See, he obviously heard me. Right, let's see how complicated we can make the next one. This is an application to just slightly move 3 windows. So if we could go to it, it's Morley Bunkers on Tunstead Lane. If you could outline the application.
Yeah, not a problem, Chair. So, as you set out there, it's a very, very minor application, but it's nevertheless one that requires a decision. So it's an application for listed building consent, so not planning. It's not a planning application, and it does follow. The applicant is, as you mentioned, it's Councillor Graham Sheldon, which is the reason it's being brought to committee for obviously transparency reasons. So it is in effect an amendment to an application that committee have seen previously in June 2021, and it was a scheme for a side extension and other alterations internally to the building. Property is grade 2 listed, hence it being a listed building consent application, and it's an 18th century 3-storey former weaver's cottage. So as the Chair said, the main change is the repositioning of structural alterations in one of the in the south elevation of the extension, and partly because of the fallback position of the previous permission, but also because it's still acceptable in its own right, it is recommended for approval subject to the conditions that are set out in the recommendation.
Has anybody, Councillor Brownrigg?
Can I move approval, sir, please?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Thanks very much. Does anybody want to make any comments on that? All those in favour? Thank you. The next application is Running Hill Cottages, Running Hill Lane, Dobb Cross, and this is removal of condition number 4 relating to permitted development, which I'll ask the officers to outline.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. So yeah, this is relates to a planning application. Again, it's previously been approved by committee, albeit in May 2020, and that was for a 2-storey side and rear extension and a 1-storey side extension. So importantly, the site is located within the Greenbelt, and at the time, officers recommended that the application be refused, and that was on the grounds of being inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and that was because of its size and scale. So at the time, the committee took a different view and granted planning permission, but in doing so included a condition that restricted what are known as permitted development rights, so essentially things that can be done without planning permission, and that was for any further extensions to the building, including outbuildings, and the justification for its inclusion at the time appears to be solely on the basis of the impact that such development under permitted development rights might have a further harmful impact on the Greenbelt. So although at the time obviously the decision was issued, the applicant would have had an opportunity to appeal the inclusion of that condition. There was no challenge ever made about it. However, we've now got an application before you seeking the removal of the condition, and what is a material consideration in this particular case is an appeal decision, albeit relates to a different site in Greenfield, which is referenced in the report, and was a decision made last year. It essentially sets, well, it's a material planning consideration, but that appeal was allowed and made the points that there has to be very, very clear justification for removing what is effectively a national grant of planning permission, which is essentially what permitted development rights are. So the actual reasoning for the inclusion of the condition is now being challenged, and having regard to that appeal decision, and in light of the tests for the appropriateness of conditions set out in the planning practice guidance, as officers we're recommending that the application be approved to remove that condition. So there's no changes to the scheme. It is solely for the removal of that particular condition. And you'll see the recommendation does include the conditions that were previously attached, but obviously omits the condition restricting permitted development rights, and also is updated in terms of the timescale condition, which is the condition number 1. So that's the introduction, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions or clarification? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, if the permitted development rights were restored, what could feasibly be, as in if the restrictions were withdrawn, if you will, or restored, however way you want to look at it, what could feasibly be done which wouldn't previously have been able to have been done at this?
Yeah. So the majority of properties, regardless of whether they're in the green belt, benefit from permitted development rights. I don't want to put a percentage on that, but the vast majority. So the potential sorts of development that could be added would be things like single-storey rear extensions, some side extensions, depending on the size of the curtilage, quite significant outbuildings potentially. I mean, the permitted development rights are very prescriptive in terms of there are limitations on a case-by-case basis on how they could be utilised to maximise each site, if you like. So I couldn't give you precise details, but they could be, notable additions, which would have been the case under those rights before that planning permission was even, before that planning application was even submitted. They would have had the full suite, if you like, of permitted development rights at the time.
Is there any further questions? No. Is there any comments on the application? Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the lesson to the committee on this one is if you remove the permitted development rights to allow someone to be able to build an extension on such a property, that isn't a tool you can use anymore. So I'm not sure if I was on the committee that time when that one was done, but once bitten, twice shy is the answer to that one, and we need to take that into account for future reference.
Just for clarification, in this particular case, I remember that the application is that the agent for the developer said that he would like permitted development rights removed if the committee actually approved the application, which they subsequently did. And now, of course, because of case law, we're caught in catch-22, and we virtually have to approve this because it wouldn't stand the test at appeal at all. So I would, because of that, propose approval. Councillor Gloucester.
Ask a question then. Was that condition applied as a bit of a punishment then, or I don't understand why? Well, why would that be applied to an approval?
I think at the stage it was part of the debate, and I think officers have mentioned that the application was approved against the officer's recommendation last time by committee, and I remember the case, and I think committee was influenced by the agent saying that he would understand if the committee put a condition to remove development rights on the property. Subsequently, there's been case law built up that now permitted development rights can't be enforced in this particular application. I think that's outlined it reasonably well.
Yeah, you've covered it better than I would have done that, Chair.
Yeah. So I would move because of that approval. Is that second? All those in favour? Thanks very much indeed. And that concludes the